Hello, everyone. Welcome to the HR Growth Network podcast with Olutoyin Williams. In this episode of a podcast, we're going to be discussing a really interesting topic. I have met with quite a number of senior HR people who are looking to get into the next level of their career and they are struggling. Is that you? Listen to how this episode is going to help you to be able to get out of that space where you're struggling and into that space where you're thriving. A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a senior HR colleague who felt she's been stuck in this position where she's been HR manager for a couple of years and it just feels as if she could not get into a much senior HR role. We got into the conversation and I really just wanted to understand what exactly was she feeling, what has she done, how has she done it, and how I could support her. So this episode is going to be featuring excerpts from that conversation. And of course, I'm going to reflect on things with you because I would like you to be able to take out specific things that you can do if you are in that position where you have been in human resources for a couple of years, but you have been in a senior role. You've been HR manager for a couple of years and you're wondering, when are you going to ever become the head of human resources, either in your current organization or do you have to leap out into another organization? So let's get into this conversation. In the first instance, for you to have that aspiration to be head of human resources, it's not just an aspiration based on a whim. It's not something that is going to come to you because you've done 2 years as HR manager. There is a lot that goes into it. That is not to say that you can't have a rapid acceleration of your career. However, you are better off going at a pace where when you get to that senior level, you're not overwhelmed by the scope of responsibilities. You're not overwhelmed with how much more you need to do, and you're mentally prepared to be in that level. So putting that at the back of your mind, and I'm saying this because there might be listeners who might be thinking, I've been an HR manager for 2 years. When am I going to become head of human resources? My friends, you would find that the position head of human resources does require a lot more maturity. That position requires you to be able to navigate quite a number of challenging situations that your current head of human resources is shielding you from because you're simply not at that level where you're able to, navigate those challenges. You're able to have the emotional maturity to bear up in those situations. So that being said, I would say that in my understanding of how progression within the HR career works, there's a lot of emotional maturity that is required. And that's because you're going to get a lot of things thrown at you. You're going to be put in situations where if you're not emotionally mature enough for it, you'll be asking, what is this? What does this even mean? Why are we even discussing this? Trust me, friends, you would have to discuss a number of things that you may not be comfortable with, but you need that emotional maturity to be able to navigate those difficult conversations, and not just navigate them as in you getting out of it without being in a sticky situation, but navigating and helping to facilitate the conversation such that the organization is in a position where they can make a good decision for all parties involved. So that takes a lot of emotional maturity. Now, that being said, let's now delve into it. So you are at that position. Let's assume you're in that position. You are ready. You feel ready to get into the next level, which is head of human resources. You've been HR manager for a bit, but somehow it's not happening. I want us, on this episode of the podcast, I want us to talk about how you're feeling. How are you feeling? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling upset? Do you think there might even be somebody who is sitting on that promotion? Have you taken a good look at yourself and of your performance, and from a very unbiased view, would you say you're ready? Now, don't get me wrong. No one is ever fully 100 or 1,000% ready for something. There will still be some parts of it that you're not ready for. But would you say that you're largely ready? And if you are largely ready, what's been holding you back? Have you scrutinized yourself to be sure that there is nothing on your side, there is nothing on your sheet of the paper that is holding you back? The reason why I'm having this conversation with you is because, see, friends, it's easy to throw a pity party. It's very easy for you to think, oh, so and so and so is the blocker. So and so, we had a conversation last year, one director in my organization. It's easy to sort of point fingers to everybody outside of yourself. That's the easiest thing in the world to do. It's a lot harder for you to have a very open conversation with yourself and say, you know what? These are the 4 things that I haven't done, that I have yet to do, that I am not doing, that I suck at. And that's the reason why you have this conversation with me. That's the reason why you're listening to this podcast. That's the reason you're watching this. Because I have the obligation to help you understand what it is that is the gap. Now, one thing I can tell you for sure is it's never easy for you to look at yourself and see the gap. No, it's not. It's not. We've all been there. We all feel we're super duper stars. And quite rightly so, we feel we're super duper stars. It's human to feel that you're a super duper star, that you're high performing, that you're perfect, that there is absolutely nothing that is holding you back from being put in that position. It does take a lot of maturity. It takes the help of someone else to see where the gaps are and what you need to do in order to close that gap. So I'm going to start with a first gap today in this episode and in the subsequent episodes, because this series is specially dedicated to that senior HR professional who's feeling stuck. It's dedicated to that senior HR professional who's feeling like he or she is ready for the next step in their career, which is head of HR or a much more senior level in HR, but somehow they feel held down. They feel held down. So the first thing that I want to talk about is mindset. Do you really feel ready for that position? If your answer is yes, Olutoyin, I feel ready. The question is, can you list out on paper a list of skills that you know are required for success at the position of a head of HR level? And can you honestly rank yourself as to where you are in relation to those qualities? I'll take a few minutes. I'll take a pause for you to list out on paper. What are those qualities that are required at the position of a head of human resources? Do you have them? To what extent do you have them? One of the first things I need you to understand is there's absolutely nothing that is out of your reach that you cannot be prepared for. So let's just put that on the table. Let's just put that on the table and get it over it. There is nothing that you want that you cannot be prepared for. You just need to prepare. Now, the thing with preparation is there are 2 factors to preparation. First, have you got someone to help prepare you? And then secondly, are you willing and open to taking feedback? Remember what I said earlier? Some of us rightly think that we're super duper stars. I think I'm a super duper star, but I know now that I am not a super duper star because there are things that I'm constantly having to work on. And the first mark of you being emotionally mature enough to be able to identify the things you need to work on is just that honesty. If you look back, and I hope that by virtue of you watching this video, you might be able to take yourself through this exercise. If you look back over the last 12 months of you being in your current role now, what is the hardest feedback that your line manager has given you? I'm happy to take a pause so you can write that down. What is the hardest feedback that your line manager, is your line manager the current head of human resources? Do you report to somebody within the human resource team? What is the hardest piece of feedback they've given to you? I want you to write it down. Have you written it down? Fantastic. How did you take it? Go on. How did you take it? Were you receptive? Were you receptive of that feedback? Did you appreciate it? Did you thank them and say, thank you very much for giving me this feedback? Did you get home and have a conversation with your hubby, your partner, your close friend and say, you know what? Crap. Rubbish. Nonsense. Me. Are you kidding? Or did you genuinely reflect on it? Did you see any truth to it? Or you felt it was just a bunch of crap? See, I need you to be honest with me. I need you to be honest with yourself. The very, very first thing to look into when I work with my clients and we're exploring their readiness for the next level of their career is their ability to take on feedback. And trust me, friends, taking feedback is not the easiest thing to do, especially maybe if you feel there is no real basis for that feedback. You feel that feedback was ill-motivated. You feel that feedback was incorrect. You feel that feedback was not even properly delivered. But you know the telltale sign of emotional maturity is your ability to take feedback. Even when you feel, or even when it seems that the feedback was crappy, how the feedback was delivered was rubbish, your feedback was not deserved, the feedback was an opportunity to knock you down. But how did you take it? And that's the point that I'm going to leave you with in this episode of the podcast. I'm going to leave you with thinking through the last 12 months, the hardest feedback that you were given. How did you take it? Were you open? Were you receptive? Were you defensive? Did you feel that was rubbish? Did you delete it? Immediately you heard it, you deleted it because you didn't even want to hear it. Or did you reflect on it? I'm going to leave you to think about that. Your ability to hear feedback, even when the feedback is crappy, seems crappy, feels crappy, comes across as being crappy, is one extremely important factor in your ability to rise into a much more senior role, because you will always get feedback. Friends, let's talk about this. You will always get feedback. Even if you were one day the CEO of your business, of your company, if you rose from being in HR to being CEO, and we've seen people who've done that, you will still be subject to the board. And the board will give you feedback. So if your current line manager is giving you feedback and you think that feedback is crappy, you feel that feedback is ill-timed, undeserved, absolutely out of context, you need to check your feeling. Why do you feel so? Is it because you think you are perfect? Your work is above reproach? And is that correct? Is that the truth? Like, have you looked at your work and you feel like, you know what, this is Perfect. There's nothing better anywhere in the world. Is that the truth? You've checked all of the models of how this could have been done. You have consulted all the frameworks that are available, and you think yours is perfect. And there's absolutely nothing anyone can take away from that framework. If you have that, if you check, if you do this exercise and you check and you have that, my friend, we need to have a conversation. Let's have a heart to heart. Because you must be willing, you must be open, you must be receptive to taking feedback. That's not to say that you should then go fishing from feedback. You should then go fishing for feedback from quarters where you know it has constantly been negative and you're exposing yourself to such negative, that negative. No, that's not what this is about. But this is about you being open-minded enough to understand that you obviously don't know everything. Open-minded to understand that another person can see things from a different perspective, and that perspective may be valid and could add value to what you're doing. Open-minded enough to know that this is not about your ego. That, my friend, is a true mark, a first true mark of you being emotionally ready and mature enough for the next level of HR. Because you will get feedback. So I want you to go away this week. I want you to go away and think about your ability to take on feedback. I want you to look at the last 12 months. I want you to look at the hardest feedback you've got. And I want you to honestly look at that feedback to say, how did I react to that feedback? Was I defensive? Was I argumentative? Did I try to protect my position? Did I try to protect my ego? Did I feel like I was being attacked? Or was I able to isolate that the feedback was for the situation, the feedback was for the project, the feedback was for the assignment, the feedback was not personal to me? That's what I'm going to leave you with. And I love the fact that you're tuning in to listen to this podcast. Either you're listening to it on Spotify or you're watching the video on YouTube. Thank you very much for giving your time. This podcast and series of special podcasts is dedicated to that HR professional who's looking to get into the next level of their career. And through this podcast, we're hoping to provide the information. We're hoping to provide the transformation that is required in order for you to get into the next level of your career. The HR Growth Network is a network that is positioned to supporting HR professionals at all levels of their career. But this particular string of podcasts, this particular series of podcasts is meant to support the senior HR person who's looking to get into the next level of their career. If you have questions, you have comments, there's a particular thing you would love to hear my feedback on, please feel free to drop a comment either here on Spotify or on YouTube, and I'll be happy to reach out back to you in order to either create a video or create a podcast that addresses your question, or I might even write to you back directly if you leave your details for me. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Feel free to join the HR Growth Network. We have a free group on LinkedIn. And of course, if you would love to be coached, please feel free to get in touch by going to the website www.olutoyinwilliams.co.uk, and you can click on the programs for you to find out how to get in and be part of the HR Growth Network. Till I come your way again, do take care and see you.